Day of trade today. When we walked into trade, we were standing at a weak set of global cues. The SGX Nifty, in fact, was indicating that it's going to be a down day for us, but it was far removed from that. Given the show of resilience that you saw from the Indian markets in today's trading session, Asia, of course, was deep gash today. There were internal crackdowns coming in on Chinese edtech firms that brought about a fair amount of sell-off on the Asian tech markets. You had most of these markets, in fact, shut shop deep in the red. China lost about almost 2.5% today. Hong Kong, the index dropped more than 2%. China tech shares have taken a big plunge there. You've seen a sell-off to the tune of about almost 4.25% coming in for the HSI index. Periphery markets like Australia as well as Korea too were in the red today, and surprising as it may be, even Europe, when it started off trade, most of these markets were lingering in the red. For that matter, even Dow Futures was scaling lower by about 1.5%, or rather 150 points actually, stand corrected here, 0.5% downtick. But that said, the weakness didn't quite rub off on our markets. At least the Nifty stayed put at that 15,800 mark, didn't quite breach that mark in today's trading session. Even the market breadth, for the large part of today's trading session, for the better part actually, managed to stay afloat and was running even Steven. It's only in the last lap of today's trade that you did see the declines manage to take over. But that also not by a very big margin, about 101 stocks to about 62 standing to the advances. Now to, of course, what was gaining and losing in trade, and where were the pressure points as well as the winners, because it was largely earnings specific. SBI Life shot up massively in trade. It's managed to now almost nudge the 1100 price point per share. 1091 is where it shut shop. And that big move really came in after its earnings. Bajaj Finance continues to see an up move from last week. Another 2.6% put on in trade today as well. You had a Divi's Lab, you had a Hindalco, Ultratech Cement, as well as Tata Steel and Britannia, which were the gainers. The day, of course, began reacting to a whole host of weekend earnings, starting off, of course, by Reliance, which came out with its numbers on Friday evening. Pretty quiet close coming in on Reliance, given that the street was a little disappointed that there was no update coming in, the Just Dial acquisition, on the O2C business, on what happens to JioPhone Plus. Those were details that the markets were awaiting. But that said, Reliance closed in flat with a negative bias for itself, and finally, in fact, closed in at the session lows about 1.5% lower. So that sort of weighed heavy on the index today. Besides Reliance, there was also ICICI Bank as well as ITC, which were reacting to their numbers. ICICI Bank closed in absolutely flat after a weak start, a bit of a pickup, finally closing in flat, and ITC was the other earnings contender. But today as well, the earnings street was extremely busy. You've got L&T, which is awaited to come out with its numbers, as is Axis Bank and Tata Motors. We're already done with Kotak Bank. That came out with its numbers, and Kotak Bank managed to close in higher by about 1% in the trade. The breadth of the market, like I mentioned, managed to tilt in favor of the declines. United Spirits, Glenmark, Naveen Fluorine, M&M Finance were the laggards. And on the flip side, Sun TV, MFSL, Coromandel Fertilizers, these were a couple of stocks which managed to stand with gains.